My name is Miranda Hayes. I'm 42 years old. 3 weeks ago, at exactly 6:12 a.m., my phone rang and, before I even picked it up, I had a feeling something wasn't right. Almost no one calls me that early. And when I saw the name on the screen, Linda Parker, I knew this wasn't anything ordinary. Linda is my mom's neighbor. She's lived next door in Claremont, Florida, for the past 15 years. She's not the kind of person who calls without a reason. I answered, "Miranda, I'm sorry for calling so early." Her voice was quiet, but there was hesitation in it. I sat up straight immediately. "Is everything okay?" There was a few seconds of silence. Then she said, "Your mom's house has been closed up for 3 days. The lights haven't been on and I haven't seen her outside." Something in my mind just stuck. My mother, Dorothy Hayes, is 81 years old. She has dementia. She doesn't go outside alone. Honestly, she doesn't even make it to the front of the house without assistance. "Did you knock on the door?" I asked. "Yes, twice." No answer. "And the mail is piling up outside." I couldn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I called my brother, Craig. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail every time. On the 4th call, he finally picked up. "What is it?" His voice carried no urgency. "Craig, Linda says Mom's house has been shut for 3 days. Where is she?" A brief pause, very small, but I noticed it. Then he said, "She's fine. Just don't overreact." Something tightened inside me. "What do you mean she's fine? Where is she?" "I've got everything handled," he said, sounding irritated. "Stop turning everything into an issue." And then he hung up. I sat there for a few seconds. If it had been anyone else, I might have believed them. But Craig's response wasn't normal. He always explains things. But this time, he didn't explain anything. I called again. This time, he didn't pick up. I put my phone down and looked around the room like I was trying to make sense of something. Over the past few weeks, something had been slowly changing. We used to have a video call every Sunday. Mom would come on screen, smile, sometimes forget my name, but she always recognized me. Then the calls started fading. First, "She's sleeping." Then, "She's not feeling well today." Then, "I'll connect you tomorrow." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I told myself it was because of her condition. But now, when I put it all together, it didn't feel right. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water, but I could only drink half. There was something else bothering me. Every month, I send money for Mom's expenses, medication, groceries, care, whatever she needs. Craig always said he had everything under control. But last month, when I casually asked how much expenses had increased, he changed the subject. At the time, I didn't take it seriously. Now, it kept coming back to me. I picked up my phone, and this time, I went straight to flights. Raleigh to Orlando, the earliest one available. Because one thing was becoming clear. If everything really was fine, no one would tell me to stop overreacting. And maybe, for the first time, I wasn't overreacting. I opened my laptop and started checking flights. The earliest one from Raleigh to Orlando was at 10:40 a.m. I didn't have much time to think, but I still stared at the screen for a few seconds. Because if I was wrong, none of this was necessary. But if I was right, there was no room to wait. I booked the ticket. After that, everything moved quickly, and yet, somehow it felt slow. I called my manager. "There's a family emergency. I need to take a few days off." He didn't ask many questions. Then I texted my friend Jessica. "Can Lily stay with you today?" She replied with just one line, "Of course." I started packing my bag. Lily stood by the door, watching me. "Is Grandma okay?" I zipped up the bag and looked at her. "I'm going to find out." I said it, but I didn't even know what I was about to find. I couldn't sleep during the flight. I kept trying to piece things together, everything from the past few weeks. The Sunday calls that slowly stopped. Craig's short replies that were never this short before. And then there was that one thing that had only felt slightly off at the time. Last month, I asked him how Mom's expenses were going. He said, "I've got it handled." That was it. No numbers. No details. Craig was never like that. He explained everything. Sometimes a little too much. But that day, he ended the conversation quickly. I didn't push it then. Now, it kept replaying in my mind, like a small piece that didn't fit with the rest. The flight landed at 12:47 p.m. I grabbed a car and drove straight to Claremont. The roads looked the same as always, but everything felt different. Maybe because this time I wasn't going to visit, I was going to see. I reached Mom's house at 2:15. The first thing I noticed was the grass. It had grown. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to tell no one had taken care of it for a few days. The mailbox was full. Newspapers were lying by the door. I stepped out of the car and stood there for a few seconds. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I opened the door. The air inside was still heavy, like no windows had been open for days. I walked in slowly. Mom, no answer. I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge. The milk had expired. The sink was empty. Then my eyes fell on the counter. The pill organizer. I walked over and opened it. For days. 4 full days of medication untouched. I just stood there. Something inside me had settled now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And now, I didn't just need to know where my mom was. I needed to understand what was really going on here. I stood there for a while right in the middle of the kitchen. Everything was in front of me, and still, the full picture wasn't coming together. 4 days of medication untouched. That meant Mom hadn't been here for at least 4 days. And Craig had said, everything's fine. I slowly closed the pill organizer, like pressing it shut too hard might break something. I wasn't guessing anymore. Now I was seeing. I started checking the entire house carefully. The living room, clean, but it didn't feel lived in. The TV remote was placed in one spot, perfectly straight. Mom never did that. Her things were always a little scattered, just part of who she was. I walked into her bedroom. The bed was made, but not the way she made it. It was too neat, like someone had fixed it in a hurry. Her purse was in the closet. Her glasses were on the nightstand. If she had gone anywhere, she would have taken those. I slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. Up until now, things weren't just missing. They didn't match. I pulled out my phone and opened the app one had installed a year ago, Life 360, on Mom's iPad, just so I could occasionally check if she was home. The location was offline for 4 days. I stared at the screen for a while like it might explain itself. Then I put the phone down. The next step was clear. I couldn't go directly to the bank. I didn't have the authority. But I knew which branch Mom used. Wells Fargo, the one off Highway 27. I was there within the hour. The branch looked the same, small, clean, quiet. I walked up to the counter and said directly, I need to speak about my mother's account, Dorothy Hayes. They asked for basic details. I gave them everything. Then the teller glanced at the screen for a second, and her expression shifted slightly. Ma'am, this account has power of attorney under your brother's name. We can't share details with you. I nodded. I expected that. I was about to leave when the branch manager came out herself. Miss Hayes. I turned. She led me into her office. As soon as we sat down, she repeated, we can't provide you with direct information. Then she paused and lowered her voice. But if something doesn't feel right, you may want to seek legal advice. She didn't say anything directly, but her tone, it felt like a warning. I just nodded and walked out. I didn't have proof yet, but I had direction. I got back into my car and sat there for a few seconds, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't just about where Mom was anymore. Now, it was, why wasn't I being told the truth? I picked up my phone and called Craig again. This time, he answered quickly. What now? His voice was sharper than before. I asked directly, where is Mom, Craig? I told you she's safe. Where? Why can't you just trust me? I stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then I said, slowly, because nothing feels normal. He didn't respond, just the sound of his breathing. And then the call disconnected. I lowered the phone. Now it was clear. This wasn't just about hiding information. This was control. And control always has a reason. I dialed a number right then. An elder law attorney I had found online. I needed to stop guessing. I needed to know. Because whatever was happening, it didn't feel like an accident. And if it wasn't an accident, then what was it? The next morning, I was sitting in that attorney's office. Her name was Janet Morales. A small office in Orlando. Clean, simple, no excess. She let me talk. I told her everything from Linda's call to the closed house, the medication, Craig's behavior, the bank incident. She didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, she said one line, "This isn't normal." I already knew that, but hearing someone else say it felt different. She laid out a plan immediately. First, we pull the bank records through a subpoena. Then we bring in a forensic accountant to trace every transaction. I nodded. Things were starting to take shape. 3 days later, the records came in. I was back in the same office. This time, another woman was there with Janet, Helen Trass. A laptop was open in front of her. "I'll get straight to the point," Helen said. She turned the screen toward me. A timeline. Red dots connected in a line. These are transactions from the last 14 months. I looked closely. At first, everything seemed normal. Small expenses, bills, groceries. Then, gradually, the pattern changed. "Look here," Helen zoomed in. The first large transfer. $18,000. I frowned. "Where did that go?" "To your brother's personal account." Something inside me dropped, but I stayed quiet. She scrolled further. Another transfer. $25,000. Then another. And another. Total amount, she paused. Approximately $340,000. The room went silent for a few seconds. It felt like I couldn't hear anything. "All of this?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "And that's just transfers. There are also cash withdrawals." She opened another screen. ATM withdrawals. $800, $1, $200, $2, 000. Every week. "This pattern suggests gambling activity," she said plainly. I didn't take my eyes off the screen. My money was in there too. Every month, the $1,200 I sent was transferred the same day to Craig's account. Not a single payment went directly toward Mom's care. Not one. Janet spoke gently. "There's one more thing." She slid a document toward me. An admission form. Facility name, Lakeview Senior Care, Tavares, Florida. Patient name. I read it and stopped. Dorothy Beckett. I looked up. "That's not my mother's name." Janet said, "That's her maiden name." My hands felt cold. I looked down again. Next of kin, Craig Hayes. Other living relatives, none. None. I stared at that word for a few seconds. I was alive. I had just started fighting for her yesterday. And on paper, it said none. "What does that mean?" I asked. Janet answered directly. "It means you were intentionally removed." The room suddenly felt smaller. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was deliberate. I asked quietly, "Is Mom there?" Janet nodded. "Yes. And we should go now." We got there the same day. It was a small facility. Simple, not crowded. I walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. Room 14. The door was half open. I pushed it gently. Mom was on the bed. She looked thinner, more than before. Her hair was unkempt. There was nothing personal in the room. No photos. Nothing that felt like her. I stepped inside slowly. "Mom." She opened her eyes. It took a few seconds to recognize me. Then she said, "Miranda?" I sat beside her, held her hand. It was cold. I didn't say anything, because now everything was clear. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision. And now, only one question remained. How was I going to deal with this? And what was I going to do about Craig? I sat there in that room for a while in silence. Mom's hand was in mine, light, cold, but alive. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, then stopped. "You came," she said softly. "Yeah, Mom. I'm here." She nodded, like she tucked that thought somewhere deep inside. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't too late, but I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I called Janet that same day. "We need to move forward," I said. She didn't hesitate. "We'll file a petition immediately to revoke guardianship and to freeze the assets." After that, everything started moving fast. 2 days later, we were in court. A small courtroom. The judge in front, Janet and I on one side, Craig on the other. I looked at him. He didn't look the same. Not confident, not defensive. Just quiet. The hearing began. Janet laid everything out clearly. Bank records. Transactions. The facility admission form. False information. Then Helen presented the timeline. 14 months. Red. All moving in one direction. The judge studied the screen for a few seconds. Then she looked at Craig. Would you like to explain? For the first time, he looked at me. And there was nothing in his eyes that I expected. No anger. No clear guilt. Just exhaustion. I was going to pay it back, he said quietly. I just needed some time. No one spoke. The judge closed the file. This court finds that you have violated your fiduciary duty, she said, her voice firm. Therefore, your guardianship is terminated, effective immediately. Something shifted inside me, but I stayed still. Temporary guardianship is granted to Miranda Hayes. And this matter will be referred for criminal investigation. That was it. One strike of the gavel, and it was over. Craig sat there for a few seconds, then stood up and walked out without saying a word. I didn't stop him. I didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say. The weeks that followed were straightforward but not easy. I moved Mom out of that facility, to North Carolina to a memory care center near my home, a place where people spoke to her by name, where her medications were given on time, where the room didn't feel empty. Slowly, she started getting better. Not completely, but enough. One day, I was sitting in her room. She was by the window, sunlight falling across her face. She looked at me, this time a little clearer. You came to get me, didn't you? I smiled. Yeah, Mom. She held my hand. Thank you. Just 2 words. But it was everything. Craig, there's a case against him now. The house is gone. The money is gone. And people have slowly walked away. I haven't spoken to him. Maybe I will someday, maybe I won't. But one thing is clear. I didn't lose him in that courtroom. I lost him the day he wrote none next to my mother's name. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Sometimes the problem isn't that someone is missing. The problem is that someone is hiding the truth, and we choose to believe everything is fine. If someone keeps pushing you away, if your questions never get real answers, then maybe that is your answer. I was 700 miles away. But distance isn't an excuse. Seeing, asking, and standing up when it matters. That's responsibility. Now I can sleep at night because I didn't look away. I saw, I asked, and I chose not to stop. And if someone thinks I was wrong for that, that's okay. Because some decisions are made for one reason only. They're the right ones. And if you've listened to this story all the way through, then maybe you understand. Sometimes asking questions isn't wrong. If something like this has ever happened to you, or you've ever felt like something wasn't right, leave a comment below. I really do read them. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, where the truth unfolds slowly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because stories like these aren't just heard, they're understood.